everyone is giving their hot take on the new Pope, Pope Leo the 14th. There are black pillars out there, and there are those who are going full steam ahead on the optimism train. But do the facts present a more nuanced picture than either of these positions? When Cardinal Robert Prevost was announced as Pope Leo XIV from the loggia overlooking St. Peter's Square, many were unaware that he was even a frontrunner for the papacy. When Pope Leo himself appeared, there were immediate discernible differences between him and Pope Francis. If you remember, in what many call an ostentatious display of humility, Pope Francis came out on the loggia for the first time dressed in the more informal, all-white garb of the Pope, rather than the traditional formal vestments of his predecessors. Not only did Pope Leo revert to the more traditional vestments, but he also said a blessing in Latin. Then there is, of course, his name, Leo. Pope Leo the 13th was one of the greatest popes that we've had in the last couple hundred years. He wrote the seminal encyclical Rerum Novarum, which deals with the rights of man, the dignity of the worker, and is kind of an all-around rebuttal of communism. And by the way, this footage of Pope Leo the 13th is not AI. This is actual footage of Pope Leo the 13th, and he is the oldest known person to be filmed, which is pretty cool. Any pope in our modern era who takes the name Leo would be assumed to be have more of a traditional bent. Also, Pope Leo wrote the St. Michael prayer after hearing a conversation between Satan and Christ in which Satan boasts that if he had more power and more time, he could destroy the church. Christ gives Satan that power and time that he desires, which inspired Pope Leo to write the prayer to St. Michael to protect us from Satan and his minions. May 8th, the day that Pope Leo XIV was elected, is in fact a feast of St. Michael. Mind blown. Like, that is an insane coincidence. I've heard Catholics interpret that both positively and negatively. So who knows what that means? It has also come out that Pope Leo has long been in the habit of saying the Latin Mass. These are some of the good indicators. Now, what are some of the negative? The most glaring of the negatives are, of course, the abuse cover-up allegations that have kind of plagued him for some time now. His old diocese in Peru denies these allegations and is kind of difficult to separate fact from fiction. Catholic journalist Christine Niles has said that she is wanting to do some digging on this subject, and I would be interested to know what, if anything, she finds. So I will be checking back with her for sure. Now we get into more of the cloak and dagger stuff. So right before the conclave began, a reporter from Info Vaticana wrote the following, in which he predicts Cardinal Prevost as the liberal Pope Francis faction's favorite candidate. And just to set this up a little bit, Austin Ivory, the gentleman mentioned in this article, is a biographer of Pope Francis and is sort of the journalistic mouthpiece of the far-left cabal of clergy in the church. And of course, James Martin is the heretical Jesuit priest who champions the rainbow cause, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to quote this article, quote, "While strolling through Borgo Pio, I ran into none other than Jesuit James Martin and Briton Austin Ivory, two of the most enthusiastic supporters of Pope Francis's pontificate and tireless defenders of the synodal, inclusive, and dialogue-oriented approach, at least on paper. Upon seeing them, my friend and travel companion wanted to say hello, so we introduced ourselves. We're from Info Vaticana. The reaction was immediate and frankly revealing. James Martin, author of Building a Bridge, that book that claims to build bridges between the church and those on the margins, turned his back on us without saying a word. No dialogue, no bridge, not even a greeting, just a wall. Quite telling. We must not be his type. Austin Ivory, on the other hand, did speak to us, though perhaps he wishes he hadn't. Visibly upset, and increasingly so as the conversation went on, he stood up, came over to us, and strongly reproached us for the campaign he believes we're running against Cardinal Robert Prevost. Very interesting campaign you're running against Prevost, he said, with a tone mixed with anger and frustration. When we replied, no, not against Prevost, against the culture of cover-up in the church. Are you now in favor of that? The discomfort was palpable. Nervously, Ivory referenced the sodalitium as the supposed origin of our information. When we explained that there are many cases, all documented, he sarcastically insisted that Info Vaticana always has more, referring to the documents we've been publishing on the matter. His reaction left no doubt. Prevost was their man, the candidate in whom they had placed all their hopes." Unquote. After Cardinal Prevost was elected Pope, Father Martin took to X to give ebullient praise of Pope Leo and said that he was a quote-unquote excellent choice. Furthermore, Jack Posobiec had this to report about Prevost receiving the support of Parolin, Pope Francis's Secretary of State and one of the movers and shakers on the shameful China-Vatican deal.
Right, so Cardinal Parolin, who we were told was the guy that was in, and this is something I've heard from sourcing on the ground. I just got back from the Vatican. It was at the conclave. I heard that Parolin was pushing Pope Leo, that he was pushing Prevost, that this was the guy. He said, Amen. Look, I know that I've been out there too much. Amen. I'm a little bit older. There's some health issues, blood pressure issues. That's why I want Prevost. Prevost is the guy. So that he went into the conclave before they closed the doors as if that he was going to be the front runner. And then behind closed doors, the very first thing that I'm told that Parolin was doing was pushing for Prevost.
It does not look good that all of these dark forces within the church seem to be pushing for Prevost. Under Pope Francis, traditional-minded Catholics got the stick, the culmination of which was the restriction of the Latin Mass. It was universally acknowledged at the time that the Latin Mass restrictions were the fault of the American traditionalist Catholics. I remember European Catholics and YouTube personalities being frankly angry at American Catholics because they considered this to be the restrictions on the Latin Mass to be our fault. We were giving Pope Francis too much pushback on his unorthodoxy. We aligned ourselves with the polarizing figure of Donald Trump, who, I might remind my European Catholic brothers and sisters, gave us the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which is no small thing. And I do want to kind of linger on this point a bit. Regardless of whether you are a black pillar or a white pillar or anything in between on the new pope, this is the power that the laity has, to respectfully hold the church hierarchy's feet to the fire. And this is something that canon law does allow for. As long as respect is shown for the office of bishop, cardinal, or even pope, the laity can and should bring concerns and even careful criticism before our spiritual fathers. Now remember, St. Paul describes in the New Testament even how he, quote, withstood Peter to his face because he was to be blamed, unquote. That's a quote from one of the Pauline epistles. Pope Francis was going to do women deacons, but he got so much pushback from the American church that he decided not to go there, for now. And remember, it was Fulton Sheen who said that it is the laity who will save the church. We need to remember our place in the church hierarchy. We are the laity. We aren't ordained. But our place is to sometimes give pushback as faithful sons and daughters of the church. Speaking of the American trad Catholics, we were also kind of letting everyone know that we wanted the name Leo for our next pope. Taylor Marshall, Michael Knowles, and others were all saying that they wanted a Pope Leo months, weeks, and days before the conclave started. And taking the name Pope Leo, are they just telling us what we want to hear? Is Pope Leo the 14th the carrot to Francis's stick? So I saved one of the biggest positives about Pope Leo for last. As I mentioned in a previous video, LifeSite reported that cardinals were seen going in and out of Cardinal Burke's apartments right before the conclave. Now, Cardinal Burke, if you remember, is the acknowledged head of the kind of conservative, traditional-minded faction in the church. Cardinal Prevost was one of the cardinals seen going in to meet with Burke before the conclave. It has also come out that Burke and American Cardinal Dolan were the main kingmakers in this conclave. In fact, I am told some French sources are calling this a coup de Burke, as Burke helped to orchestrate all of this. And it is Burke who, as an American, who would know Prevost the best. Apparently, he was perhaps counting on the other more progressive cardinals not knowing him as well. I will say that while it would be easy to fake it by using some Latin and wearing the traditional papal garb when coming out onto the loggia, it would be a lot harder to fake a devotion to the Latin Mass by saying it apparently for years. That's kind of a hard thing to fake. And in the end, only time will tell. Watch particularly what Pope Leo does with doctrine. Now, overturning the restrictions on the Latin Mass, as much as I would love that, isn't as important as, say, properly clarifying what Pope Francis has said about communion for divorced and remarried, or the document which appears to give permission to bless irregular unions, if you know what I mean. YouTube, please don't censor me. Doctrinal matters is where the rubber will truly meet the road. So let's watch and see and pray. Let's continue to pray for Pope Leo XIV. Viva il Papa!